Have you ever been in a place that just feels wrong? I can't quite explain it, but it's that feeling, like you're being watched, even when you're alone. That's how I felt from the moment I stepped foot into my new apartment. My name is Laura, I'm 28, and I'm an art historian. I've always been fascinated by old things, by the hidden stories behind objects. So when I found that apartment on a quiet old street in the city with its 19th century decor, it seemed perfect. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, the wooden floors creaked with every step, and then there was it, the mirror. I found it in a dimly lit room hanging on one of the dust-covered walls. Its golden frame was worn and the glass was cracked in several places. There was something about it that I couldn't look away from, a disturbing attraction. The mirror was old, stained, like it had absorbed time itself. The landlord warned me, almost laughing, that the mirror had a dark history. He said it was a portal, a doorway to another world. Of course, as a historian, I didn't believe it. I was more interested in figuring out the mirror's origin than indulging in cheap superstitions. But that night, after moving in and settling down, I noticed something. It wasn't the mirror itself that bothered me. It was the feeling that something was watching me through it. The first night while I was studying, a cold draft swept through the room, like someone had walked past me. I looked at the mirror, and I swear I saw something. Not my reflection, but someone. A fleeting shadow that disappeared as soon as I tried to focus on it. An illusion, I thought. My mind was tired. But the following nights were worse. I would sit in front of the mirror for hours, feeling a growing presence. Each time I stared into it, it was as if the reflection was waiting for something. On the third night, I saw him clearly for the first time. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a man, pale, with sunken eyes and a look of despair that made my heart stop. He stared at me like he wanted to speak. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Something about him was terrifying, yet at the same time, I felt a strange pity. His presence filled the room. I got closer, trying to understand what he wanted, but as soon as I did, he vanished, like dust in the wind. That night, I did some research on the apartment's history and found something that chilled me to the bone. Decades ago, there had been a murder here. A man was killed, his body never found. The story was murky, shrouded in mystery. And that's when I began to understand. The mirror was more than just an object. It held memories, and maybe something else. The following nights were torment. Every night the man appeared again. I saw his reflection in every reflective surface in the apartment. First in the mirror, then in windows, even in puddles of water. And the worst part? He was closer each time. Every appearance he got nearer to me. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think. His presence suffocated me, trapping me inside a distorted reality. And then the last night came. I was sitting in the armchair facing the mirror, waiting. I knew he would come. The clock struck midnight, and as always, he appeared. But this time, he wasn't distant. He was right behind me. I could feel his cold breath on my neck, even though I knew he had no lungs to breathe. Panic gripped me. I had to break the cycle, free this trapped soul, or maybe save myself. I grabbed the nearest object, an old rusty iron bar, and stood up, ready to destroy the mirror. But he stopped me, not with his hands, but with something deeper. A whisper, an echo, not just from the mirror, but from inside me. He said my name, Laura. My body froze, and at that moment, I realized the horror of the truth. He wasn't just watching me, he was trying to take my place. The mirror wasn't just a portal to another world, it was a trap that needed an exchange. But I couldn't let that happen. With every ounce of strength I had left, I raised the iron bar and in one swift motion shattered the mirror. The glass exploded into 1,000 pieces, flying through the room like shards of stars. But the relief I felt didn't last. As the pieces of glass hit the floor, I saw new faces. Small, fragmented. No longer the man, but others. So many others. And all of them whispered the same name. Laura, Laura, Laura. I realized too late that breaking the mirror hadn't freed a soul. It had opened a door for many, and now they knew who I was. Now every time I look into the reflection of a window, of a glass, even in raindrops, I see them, watching, whispering, waiting. Have you ever found yourself in a place that feels like time forgot it? A place where the air is thick, and even the shadows seem to hold secrets? That's where I found myself that night. A A small town that barely existed on the map, where the streets were narrow, the lights dim, and every building looked like it was holding its breath. My name is Simon. I'm a private detective. I've spent years chasing down leads, unearthing lies, and finding people who didn't want to be found. But this case was different. A woman had disappeared, vanished without a trace. The police hit dead ends, and I was brought in to dig deeper. That's how I ended up in an antique store, of all places, looking for something, anything, that might lead me to her. The store was a relic itself, covered in dust, smelling of rot and old wood. The kind of place that seemed more like a tomb than a shop. I wandered through the cramped aisles, my eyes scanning over the strange trinkets, until something caught my attention. A necklace. Not just any necklace, but one with a crystal that seemed to pulse faintly, like it was alive, reflecting light that shouldn't have been there. It drew me in, like a moth to a flame. The old man behind the counter watched me with knowing eyes, and when I picked it up, he gave a low, raspy warning. He told me the necklace had a history. It was said to reveal hidden truths, but those truths came at a cost. Many who've worn it have paid dearly, he said, and none of them found peace. I should have listened. I should have walked out of that store and never looked back. But something about it felt right, like it was meant for me. That night I put it on. At first, nothing happened, but as the hours passed, something changed. I started seeing things, visions, glimpses of moments I couldn't possibly know. The first time, I saw her, the woman who had gone missing. She was walking down a street, glancing over her shoulder like she was being followed. I blinked, and she was gone. The visions came more frequently after that. I'd see them in the reflections of windows, in the darkness just beyond my peripheral vision. Each time, I saw her last moments. The fear in her eyes, the quickened steps, the shadow that loomed closer and closer. But it didn't stop there. Soon, I wasn't just seeing her. I was seeing others, people I'd never met. Faces twisted in terror, eyes wide with the realization that they were about to die. And always, there was the shadow. A figure lurking just out of focus, a presence that chilled the air and made my skin crawl. I couldn't escape it. Everywhere I went, the necklace burned against my chest, and with it, the visions grew darker. The missing people weren't just missing. They were being hunted, and the necklace was showing me every grim detail. I saw the blood, the screams that never reached the surface, the last, frantic moments of life. And then I realized something worse. The shadow wasn't just in the visions anymore. It was here, in my world, watching me. I could feel it, always just behind me, always waiting. I tried taking the necklace off, but it was like it had fused with my skin. I was trapped in its curse, and the more I saw, the closer the shadow came. The turning point came one night when I saw the truth. The shadowy figure, it wasn't just some faceless monster. It was the spirit of the last victim, a victim who had worn the necklace before me. The necklace didn't just reveal truths, it marked its wearer for death. The shadow was coming for me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it, except destroy the necklace. In a panic, I grabbed it, yanking at the chain with all my strength. But it wouldn't break. The air around me grew colder, and I could feel the presence closing in, suffocating me. I could hear whispers, accusations, blame. They weren't just coming for me. They were coming because of me. With a surge of desperation, I threw the necklace to the ground and grabbed a nearby stone, smashing it with everything I had. The crystal shattered into 1,000 pieces, and with it, the shadow let out a scream, an unholy wail that echoed through the room and rattled my bones. Then silence. For the first time in days, I could breathe. The air was still, and the presence was gone. The necklace lay in fragments on the floor, lifeless and dull. But the peace was short-lived. As I gathered my things to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the shattered glass. A face. Not mine. It was the woman. Her eyes stared into mine, filled with the same terror I'd seen in the visions. Her mouth opened, and though no sound came, I knew exactly what she was saying. "You can't escape." I left that town that same night, not bothering to pack. But even now, as I tell this story, I know the truth. Some things once broken never really go away. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Not just glanced at or stared at, but watched. Like something was studying you, waiting for the perfect moment to reach out and take hold? I didn't believe in that kind of paranoia until recently. Now, I know better. My name's Simon. I'm a private detective, the kind of guy people hire when the police can't or won't dig deep enough. I've seen some dark things in my time, but nothing compares to what happened during my last case. It started with a missing person. Ordinary case, or so I thought. Young woman, last seen walking home from work late one night. The usual story, no suspects, no leads, just a dead-end trail. Her family was desperate, and they asked me to take over where the cops had given up. I was following up on a lead when I ended up in this dusty little antique shop. You know the type. Dim lighting, shelves stacked with things that had seen better centuries, the smell of mildew clinging to everything. The place felt heavy, like the air itself was thick with memories and not the pleasant kind. As I was poking around, something caught my eye. A necklace, hanging from a rusty hook on the far wall. It wasn't particularly fancy, a small silver chain with a circular pendant, but there was something about it, something off. The pendant wasn't a gem or a locket. It was a small hollow circle, like it was missing a piece, or maybe it was a piece of something bigger. The shopkeeper, this old man who looked like he hadn't seen daylight in decades, shuffled over to me. He didn't even try to sell it to me, not really. He just gave me this cryptic warning. Said the necklace was cursed, that it wasn't meant for human hands. Once you wear it, he said, his voice barely a whisper, you can't escape what it brings. It doesn't just reveal truths, it creates them. I should have walked away. I should have left that shop and never looked back. But I didn't. I bought the damn thing. I don't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was arrogance. I'd solved enough cases, faced enough horrors, that I thought I could handle anything. But this was something else. That night, I put the necklace on. At first, nothing happened. I went about my usual routine, going over case notes, following leads, trying to figure out where this girl had disappeared. But as the night wore on, things started to shift. It began with a sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently knocking on wood. I thought it was just the house settling, you know? Old places make noise. But then the tapping got louder, more insistent. I searched the entire apartment, nothing, but the sound followed me, no matter where I went. And that's when I saw it. In the mirror, just behind me, a figure. Tall, thin, barely more than a silhouette, but it was there, watching me. I turned, heart pounding, but the room was empty. There was no one there. But when I looked back in the mirror, it was still there, standing, waiting. I ripped the necklace off, but it didn't matter. The thing, the watcher, it didn't leave. It was like the necklace had opened some kind of door, and now that it was open, it wasn't closing. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was stress, exhaustion, some kind of hallucination brought on by working too hard. But that night, as I lay in bed, I could feel it, standing at the foot of the bed, breathing. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. And then, it moved. A cold breath against my skin, fingers brushing my arm, like someone was testing the boundaries of my space. My body froze, paralyzed by some invisible force, as the watcher leaned closer. It whispered something, too faint to understand, but the malice in its voice was unmistakable. I shot up, sweating, gasping for air, and the room was empty again. But I wasn't alone. I was never alone after that night. Over the next few days, things escalated. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Objects disappeared, only to reappear in places I hadn't touched. And the watcher? It got bolder. It didn't just linger in mirrors anymore. It followed me in reflections, in windows, in puddles on the street, even in the glass of my watch. And with every passing day, the missing woman's face began to appear in those reflections. Her eyes were wide, her face frozen in a silent scream. It was like she was trying to warn me, trying to tell me something. But I couldn't understand. Then one night, the truth hit me. I wasn't looking for her. The necklace wasn't revealing her story. It was revealing mine. I wasn't chasing a killer. I was the one being hunted. The watcher wasn't just some ghostly figure. It was waiting for me, like it had waited for the woman before me, and whoever had worn that necklace before her. I tried to destroy it. I smashed the pendant, threw it in the fire, but it didn't burn. Nothing worked. The watcher was getting closer, more real. I could hear its breath behind me, feel its cold touch every time I closed my eyes. And then one night, I woke up, and it wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was standing over me, real and solid. its hollow eyes locked onto mine. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. All I could do was stare as it reached out, its fingers curling around my throat. And that's when I heard the whisper again. It's your turn. You know that feeling when you walk into a place and something just pulls you in? That's what happened the day I found the sketchbook. My name's Kevin, and I'm an artist. I've spent most of my life in studios, surrounded by paint, canvases, and ideas waiting to be born. But what I found that day, no, what found me, changed everything. It was in this dusty little antique shop, the kind of place that feels more like a graveyard for forgotten things. The smell of age and decay hung in the air, and the dim light barely pierced through the thick haze of dust. I wasn't even looking for anything, really. Just killing time, wandering through shelves of cracked teacups and rusty trinkets when I saw it. The sketchbook. It was old, with yellowed pages and a cover that looked like it had been through hell and back. Something about it stood out from the other clutter, like it was waiting for me to notice it. I picked it up, and as soon as I touched it, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. But it wasn't the cold that got me. It was the weight of it. Not heavy in my hands, but in my mind. Like the book itself had a presence, a story to tell, and I was the one it had chosen to listen. I didn't ask questions. I just bought it and took it back to my studio. It felt right at first. It was blank, every page untouched, clean, ready. Or so I thought. I didn't waste time. That night, I started drawing. My hand moved on its own, faster than usual, like the ideas were already fully formed in my head. The lines flowed easily, naturally. It felt like magic. I finished the first drawing, a scene of a car crash, the metal twisted and bodies flung from the wreckage. A horrific image, yeah, but I was an artist. I'd drawn dark things before, but this was different. The details were too precise, too vivid, like I'd seen it with my own eyes. I didn't think much of it until the next day, when the news broke. A fatal crash, exactly like the one I'd sketched. Same number of victims, same location, same everything. I tried to brush it off as coincidence. Maybe I'd seen something similar in the news before, and it had lodged itself in my subconscious. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Curiosity got the better of me, and I drew again. This time, a fire. A house engulfed in flames, the windows shattered, smoke billowing into the night sky. It was haunting, the way the flames twisted, almost alive, devouring everything in their path. The next morning, I saw the headlines. The exact house, the exact fire. People died. I had drawn their deaths. At first, there was a part of me that felt powerful. I could create reality with a pencil and paper. But that feeling didn't last long. Not when I realized what was really happening. Every stroke of my pencil was writing someone's fate. Each sketch was a death sentence. I tried to stop. I threw the sketchbook into a corner, buried it under piles of unfinished work, thinking that maybe if I just ignored it, the connection would break. But it didn't. The sketchbook wanted me to draw. I felt it calling to me, pulling at the edges of my mind, whispering in the silence. One night I couldn't resist. My hand moved on its own, and before I knew it, I had drawn again. A man, falling from a building. The horror on his face, the way his body twisted as he plummeted, it was too real. I tried to warn the police to stop it, but no one believed me. They never do, right? Just the ramblings of a paranoid artist. And then the next day, it happened. Exactly as I'd drawn. I was trapped. The more I fought it, the stronger the pull became. The sketchbook owned me, and it was hungry for more. But then came the worst part. One night, as I was sketching, the pencil in my hand began to move faster, almost like it was out of control. I couldn't stop it. When I finally looked down at the page, my blood ran cold. It was me. I had drawn my own death. There I was, slumped over my desk, blood pooling beneath me. The details were chilling. The time on the clock in the background, the angle of the shadows, it was my studio, my life, my end. I knew I didn't have long. The sketchbook wasn't just predicting the future, it was creating it. I could feel it. I was running out of time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Except one thing: destroy it. But destroying the sketchbook wasn't as easy as just tearing the pages out or setting it on fire. No, it was alive in some way, feeding off the death and misery it created. I had to destroy it from within, to break the connection between us. In my final moments, I drew one last thing: a sketch of the sketchbook itself, consumed by flames, reduced to ash. I poured every ounce of my will, my soul, into that drawing, hoping, praying that it would be enough to sever the bond. The room grew cold, the shadows deepened, and I felt something shift. As the last line was drawn, the sketchbook began to burn, but so did I. The flames weren't just on the page, they were in me, consuming me. My skin, my bones, my soul. I was the final sacrifice. But I did it, I destroyed it. The sketchbook was gone, or so I thought. Because in the ashes, as my vision faded and the darkness closed in, I saw something. A new book, fresh, clean, waiting, and someone else was reaching for it. My name is Courtney, and I'm a medical examiner. If you think my job is just cold bodies and sterile rooms, you're wrong. Death has a way of sticking with you, creeping into your thoughts long after the autopsy is done. But nothing could have prepared me for this. It started on a night like any other. I was working late, dissecting the latest murder victim that had come through our doors. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, casting strange, shifting shadows across the cold, sterile room. The air was thick with the scent of formaldehyde and decay, the smell that clings to your clothes, your skin, no matter how much you scrub. That's when I found it. An antique ring, left behind on the slab next to the victim. It was small, delicate, and covered in dried blood. At first glance, it looked like a piece of jewelry, nothing more. But there was something about it that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I should have left it alone. I should have logged it into evidence, kept my distance. But instead, I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I put it on. The second it slid onto my finger, I felt it. This pull, like the ring wasn't just on me, but inside me, winding through my veins. At first it was subtle, a whisper at the edge of my consciousness. But then the vision started. I was in the victim's final moments, his last breaths, the terror in his eyes. I could feel the killer's hands on him, hear their laughter echoing in my skull. I saw their faces, twisted, cruel, and the way they relished his suffering. The murder played out before me like I was standing right there, helpless, trapped. I yanked the ring off, but it didn't matter. The images, the sounds, they didn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back there, watching the life drain out of the victim over and over again. And it wasn't just him. The longer I wore the ring, the more faces I saw. Different people, different times, but all connected by something dark and violent. Murders, all of them. Victims whose lives had been stolen, their deaths recorded by this cursed ring. The worst part? They started to appear. At first it was in the corners of my vision, a glimpse of a shadow, a fleeting figure that would disappear the second I turned my head. But then they got bolder. One night, as I stood in the morgue, alone, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, but I could feel their presence, cold and suffocating, like they were standing just behind me, whispering for justice. I tried to take the ring off for good, to get rid of it, but every time I did, it found its way back to me. I would place it in a drawer, lock it up, and yet, when I turned around, it would be there. Back on the autopsy table, gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light, it wanted me to wear it. It needed me to see. The victims weren't just asking for help, they were demanding it. As the visions grew stronger, I realized this wasn't just about one murder. It was a chain. The ring had been passed down through generations, from one murderer to the next, cursed to carry the weight of their crimes. Every person who wore it became part of its twisted history. And now, so was I. The spirits of the victims, they didn't want peace, they wanted revenge. And I was their weapon. One night, the visions reached a breaking point. I saw him, the last killer. He was in the room with me, his form flickering between the living and the dead, his eyes burning with hatred. He was the one who had placed the curse on the ring, binding the souls of his victims to it, trapping them in a cycle of violence that would never end. I had to break it. I had to end the curse before it consumed me. The confrontation wasn't physical. It couldn't be. It was spiritual, a battle of wills. The ring pulsed on my finger, the metal searing into my skin as the spirits of the victims screamed in my ears, demanding justice. The killer's spirit fought back, trying to hold on to the power he had created, but I wasn't going to let him win. With every ounce of strength I had left, I focused on the ring, imagining it shattering into 1,000 pieces. I felt the pressure building, the heat intensifying, until finally there was a crack, a sound like glass breaking. The ring disintegrated, the spirits vanished, their cries fading into nothing. The killer's presence dissolved, leaving me standing alone in the silent morgue. I had done it. I had broken the curse. But as I stood there breathing heavily, I looked down at my hand. The ring was gone, yes, but there, burned into my skin, was the shape of it, a perfect imprint, like a scar. And in that moment, I knew. The curse hadn't been destroyed, it had just found a new home. In me. The visions didn't stop. In fact, they've gotten worse. And now, every time I close my eyes, I see another murder. Another victim. Another tragedy waiting to happen. The ring may be gone, but its power, its curse, lives on through me. I've tried to warn people, tried to tell them what's coming, but no one believes me. Why would they? After all, it's just a story, right? Except when you see the next news report about an unsolved murder, remember my words. Because I already know who's next and soon. So will you?